Welcome to Storybite, where we dig into old tales, ancient myths and forgotten folklore to uncover the heart of storytelling. I'm MT Lynx, author, indie dev and your friendly literary archaeologist. Today we're cracking open a story that's more than what it seems, layered with meaning, legacy and lessons for writers and readers alike. Join me now as we get ready to dissect. If you love stories with teeth, tales with twists, or just a good old-fashioned folklore with a deeper bite, tap like, hit subscribe, and join me for a new Storybite every Monday.
Let's get started, shall we?
A boy that visited fairyland. Many are the places in Wales where the ground is lumpy and humpy with tumuli, or little artificial mounds. Among these the sheep graze and the donkeys bray, and the cows chew the cud. Here the ground is strewn with the ruins of cromlechs, or Cymric strongholds, of old Roman camps, of chapels and monasteries, showing that many different races of men have come and gone, while the birds still fly and the flowers bloom. Wales is a land full of old stories, but not just stories passed down, stories hidden in the earth itself. Look at the hills. Some are smooth, but the others humpy and lumpy, shaped like something's been buried, and maybe something has. This is the tale of Eulogy, a boy who hated school so much he ran away and stumbled into fairyland. But unlike most stories, he came back, he remembered, and what he brought with him was not gold, not glory, but something far rarer, truth. Part 1. The Runaway, the realm of escape. Centuries ago, the good monks of St. David had a school where lads were taught Latin and good manners. One of their pupils was a boy named Eulogy. He was such a poor scholar, and he so hated books and loved play, that in his case spankings and whippings were almost a daily occurrence. Still, he made no improvement. He was also in the habit of playing truant, or what one of the monks called travelling to Baghdad. One of the consequences was that certain parts of his body, apparently provided by nature for this express purposes, often received a paddling. His mother loved her boy dearly, and she often gently chided him, but he would not listen to her. And when she urged him to be more diligent, he ran out of the room. The monks did not spare the rod, and soon it was the case of a whipping for every lesson not learned. One day, though he was only 12 years old, the boy started on a long run into the country. The further he got, the happier he felt, at least for one day. At night, tired out, he crept into a cave. When he woke up in the morning, he thought it was a glorious thing to be as free as the wild donkeys. So like them, he quenched his thirst at the brook. But when, towards noon, he could find nothing to eat, and his insides seemed to enlarge with the very emptiness of his hunger, which grew every minute. Then he thought that a bit of oat cake, a leek, or a bowl of oatmeal, whether porridge or flummery, might suit a king. He dared not go far out and pick berries, for by this time he saw that people were out searching for him. He did not feel yet like going back to books, rods and scoldings, but the days seemed to be as long as a week. Meanwhile, he discovered that he had a stomach, which he seemed to grow more and more aware of an aching void in it. He was glad when the sunset and darkness came. His bed was no softer in the cave as he lay down with a stone for a pillow. Yet he had no dreams like those of Jacob and the angels. When daylight came, the question in his mind was still whether to stay and starve, or to go home and get 2 thrashings, one from his daddy and another from the monks. But how about that thing inside of him, which seemed to be a live creature gnawing away, and which only something to eat would quiet. Finally he came to a stern resolve. He started out, ready to face 2 whippings rather than one ending by starvation.
So let's start with Eulogy. He was 12. He hates school. He's the medieval equivalent of a kid who draws dragons in math class and dreads every report card. But unlike most of us, Eulogy isn't skipping class. He's running into the wild. And that's important. This isn't just a kid getting lost in the woods. He's a narrative signal. The Welsh fairy tale begins with escape. He leaves the monastery, a symbol of order, learning, and tradition, and heads towards the unknown. This move kicks off what Joseph Campbell would call the departure. But Eulogy is no hero yet. He's hungry, dirty, alone, hiding in a cave, and right when he's about to give up and go back, Fairyland finds him. Part 2. The Invitation. Thematic crossing of thresholds.
But he did not have to go home yet, for at the cave's mouth he met 2 elves, who delivered a most welcome message. Come with us to the land full of fun, play, and good things to eat. At once his hunger left him, and he forgot that he ever wanted to swallow anything. All fear or desire to go home, or to risk either schooling or a thrashing, passed away also. Into a dark passage all 3 went, but they soon came out into a beautiful country. How the birds sang and the flowers bloomed. All around could be heard the joyful shouts of the little folk at play. Never did things look so lovely. Soon, in front of the broad path along which they were travelling, there rose up before him a glorious palace. It had a splendid gateway, and the silver-topped towers seemed to touch the blue sky. "What building is this?" asked the lad of his 2 guides. They made answer that it was the palace of the King of Fairyland. Then they led him into the throne room, where sat in golden splendour a king, an august figure and of majestic presence, who was clad in resplendent robes. He was surrounded by courtiers in rich apparel, and all about him was magnificence, such as this boy, Eulogy, had never even read about or dreamed.
Let's break down this moment. Eulogy meets 2 elves, a classic portal fantasy motif. But more than just a plot point, this is a deep metaphor. The cave becomes a threshold, a liminal space between worlds. Like that word liminal, eh? And what do the elves promise? Fun, play, and food. Everything Eulogy wants. But here's a twist. The moment he steps through, he forgets he was ever hungry, ever tired, ever afraid. That's a psychological detail worth pausing on. The fairy world doesn't just offer indulgence, it strips away memory. This is enchantment at its truest sense. It removes agency. Eulogy is no longer acting, he's being acted upon. Section 3. Toyland Politics. Social strata and size as power.
Yet everything was so small that it looked like Toyland, and he felt like a giant among them, even though many of the little men around him were old enough to have whiskers on their cheeks and beards on their chins. The king spoke kindly to Eulogy, asking him who he was and whence he'd come. While talking thus, the prince, the king's only son, appeared. He was dressed in white velvet and gold, and had a long feather in his cap. In the pleasantest way he took Eulogy's hand, and said, "Glad to see you. Come, let us play together." This is just what Eulogy liked to hear. The king smiled and said to his visitor, "You will attend, my son?" Then, with a wave of his hand, he signified the boys to run out and play games. And a right merry time they did have, for there were many other little fellows for playmates. These wee folk with whom Eulogy played were hardly as big as our babies, and certainly would not reach up to his mother's knee. To them he looked like a giant, and he richly enjoyed the fun of having such little men, but with beards growing on their faces, look up to him. They played with golden balls and rode little horses with silver saddles and bridles, but these pretty animals were no larger than small dogs or greyhounds. No meat was ever seen on a table, but always plenty of milk. They never told a lie, nor used bad language, or swear words. They often talked about mortal men, but usually to despise them, because that's what they liked to do. And they seemed so absurd that they always wanted foolish and useless things. To the elves, human beings were never satisfied or long happy, even when they got what they wanted. Everything in this part of fairyland was lovely, but it was always cloudy. No sun, star, or moon was ever seen. Yet the little men did not seem to mind it and enjoyed themselves every day. There was no end of play, and that suited Elydir.
Now this is where things get weird. Elydir enters the palace of the Fairy King, lavish, golden and glorious, and everyone there is tiny. Adults with beards no taller than your boot, horses the size of greyhounds. It's Toyland. But what does that size inversion mean? In stories, scale equals power. The fact that Elydir towers over them shows us in this world he has the power. But in true fairy fashion, power doesn't mean dominance. It means alienation. He doesn't belong. And yet he plays their games. He throws golden balls. He rides tiny steeds, eats only milk, and never hears a lie. That's key. In this fairyland, purity rules. No meat, no violence, no swearing, just eternal and peaceful play. But clouds always cover the sky. Literally, there's no sun or stars in fairyland. Our world of joy without a sky? That's our first sign that something's seriously wrong here. Section 4. Homesickness and honour. The return begins.
Yet by and by he got tired even of the games and play, and grew very homesick. He wanted to see his mother, so he asked the king to let him go and visit his old home. He promised solemnly to come back after a few hours. His Majesty gave the permission, but charged him not to take with him anything whatever from fairyland, and to go only with the clothes on his back. The same 2 elves, or dwarves, that had brought him to fairyland were chosen to conduct him back. When they had led him again through the underground passage and into the sunlight, they made him invisible until he arrived at his mother's cottage. She was overjoyed to find that no wolf had torn him to pieces, nor wild bull had pushed him over a precipice. She asked him many questions, and he told her all he had seen, felt, or known. When he rose up to go, she begged him to stay longer, but he said he must keep his word. Besides, he feared the rod of the monks or a thrashing from his daddy if he remained, so he made his mother agree not to tell anything, not even to his father, as to where he was or what he was doing. Then he made off and reported again to his playmates in fairyland. The king was so pleased at the lad's promptness in returning and keeping his word and telling the truth that he allowed him to go see his mother as often as he wanted to do. He even gave orders releasing the 2 little men from constantly guarding him, and told them to let the lad go alone, and when he would, for he always kept his word. Many times did Elydir visit his mother. By one road or another he made his way, keeping himself invisible all the time until he got inside her cottage. He ran off when anyone came to pay a visit, or when he thought his daddy or one of the monks was coming. He never saw any of these men. One day, in telling his mother of the fun and good times he had in fairyland, he spoke of the heavy yellow balls, of which he and the king's son played, and how those things rolled around.
Even paradise gets old. Elydir does something remarkable here. He asks the fairy king to go back, just for a visit, not forever, just to see his mum. And the king says yes, on one condition: take nothing. This is a mythic rule now. You see it in Persephone, in Orpheus, in Celtic stories like Thomas and the Rhymer. You can visit the other world, but if you bring something back, it unravels everything. The fairy king lets him go because he kept his word, and when he comes back again and again, he still follows the rule. No gifts, no lies, just visits. Until he breaks it. Section 5. The Golden Ball, Temptation and Betrayal. Before leaving his home, this boy had never seen any gold and did not know what it was, but his mother guessed that it was the precious metal of which the coins called sovereigns and worth $5 apiece were made. So she begged him to bring one of them back to her. This, Eulogy thought, would not be right, but after much argument, his parents being poor, and she telling him that out of hundreds in the king's palace, one single ball would not be missed, he decided to please her. So one day, when he supposed no one was looking, he picked up one of the yellow balls and started off through the narrow, dark passage homeward. Oh, here comes the turn now. Eulogy tells his mother about the golden balls he plays with. She's poor, and she sees an opportunity. Just one ball, she says. One tiny thing. The fairies won't notice. And Eulogy resists, at first. But eventually, he gives in. And this is the breaking point. Eulogy doesn't steal gold out of greed. He steals it for love. For family. And that's what makes this tragedy hit even harder. Because even good intentions can break sacred rules. Section 6. The Chase. But no sooner was he back on the earth and in the sunlight again than he heard footsteps behind him, and he knew he had been discovered. He glanced over his shoulder, and there were the two little men who had led him first and formerly been his guards. They scowled at him as if they were mad enough to bite the heads off 10-penny nails. They rushed after him, and there began a race to the cottage. But the boy had legs twice as long as the little men, and got to the cottage door first. He now thought himself safe, but pushed open the door and stumbled over the copper threshold, and the ball rolled out of his hand, across the floor of hardened clay, even to the nearly whitewashed border which ran about the edges of the room. It stopped at the feet of his mother, whose eyes opened wide at the sight of this shining ball of gold. As he lay, sprawling on the floor, and before he could pick himself up, one of the little men leaped over him, rushed into the room, and, from under his mother's petticoats, picked up the ball. They spat at the boy and shouted, "Traitor, rascal, thief, false mortal, fox, rat, wolf," and other bad names, remembering they don't swear. Then they turned and sped away. Now Eulogy thought he had been a mischievous boy, often willful, lazy, and never liking his books, but he had always loved the truth. The moment Eulogy crosses the threshold with the golden ball, everything changes. He's pursued. The two little men, once his protectors, are now furious. They spit venom. They call him names: traitor, thief, fox, wolf. In fairy stories, the moral weight of betrayal is immense. Eulogy didn't just break a rule, he shattered the contract that let him belong. And here's the moment I love. He races his own guilt home, and just as he stumbles through the door, he drops the ball at his mother's feet. And before he can even stand up, one of the little men is there, grabbing it, sneering, and vanishing. That's fairy justice. Swift, cold, and final. Section 7. The Guilt. A boy with a broken word. He was very sad and miserable beyond the telling, because he had broken his word of honour. So, almost mad with grief and shame, and from an accusing conscience, he went back to find the cave in which he had slept. He would return to the King of Fairies and ask his pardon, even if His Majesty never allowed him to visit Fairyland again. But, though he often searched and spent whole days in trying to find an opening in the hills, he could never discover it. Now here the story hits a bit differently. Eulogy isn't punished with a banishment. He isn't cursed or turned into a frog. No, he's punished with regret, with a deep, gnawing, soul-level guilt that no rod from the monks could ever match. Because Eulogy cares. Welcome, Tam Tam. Want to help me film? Alright, love. That's what makes him heroic. Not that he's clever, not that he's brave, but because when he breaks his word, it breaks him. He tries to go back. He searches for the caves. Days pass, weeks, but the door to fairyland is gone. The threshold only opens when you're still innocent. Section 8. Return to the monastery.
So, fully penitent and resolving to live right and become what his father wanted him to be, he went back to the monastery. There he plied his tasks so diligently that he excelled in all book learning. In time, he became one of the most famous scholars in Welsh history. When he died, he asked to be buried not in the monks' cemetery, but with his father and mother in the churchyard.
This section is beautiful. Elodie doesn't fall into despair. He doesn't get bitter. He chooses something harder. He returns to the world he once ran from. He goes back to the monks, to the rods, to the hard lessons, and he learns. He becomes the best scholar in the land, not because he suddenly loves books, but because he wants to be worthy of that trust again. He lives for the rest of his life in a way that honours truth. This is the inverse of the classic Boy Visits Fairyland and is Ruined story. Elodie grows. Fairyland wasn't an escape, it was a mirror. And now he chooses to be the person he saw himself failing to be. Section 9. The Eulogy. Epitaph and Immortal Words.
And he made a request that no name, record, or epitaph be chiselled on his tomb, but only these words: "We can do nothing against the truth, but only for the truth." The end.
Alright, let's pause here a minute. Elodie, once lied to escape a lesson, now asked to be remembered, not by his name, not by his deeds, but by a single line. Tam Tam, love, cut it out. That's not the line, by the way. Come over here. We can do nothing against the truth, but only for the truth. That's a direct echo of Corinthians 13:8, and it's brilliant placement, because in this tale, truth is the only thing that survives the fairy world. Not gold, not stories, not fame. Truth is the treasure, the one thing you can carry back from the other world without breaking it. And Elodie's life becomes a testimony to that. The fairyland's real gift. So, here's what I want you to take from Elodie's journey. He wasn't chosen. He wasn't special. He wasn't good at school or brave or clever. He was a kid who ran away. And he found a truth so powerful it transformed him. You see, that's what fairyland gives us. Not escape, but reflection. And that's the real enchantment. Not magic you cast, but the magic that calls you to become more than you were. So, this is MT Lynx, and that was your Storybite. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and if the story unlocked something in you, drop a comment. I read them all and answer almost all of them. And remember, stories change us, but only if we let them. And now you know. I'll see you in the next video. This one, right up here. Be a love and click it.